Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you to our panel on demography, immigration, and emigration. You would have heard of this. Demographic aging, birth rates in a free fall across Europe, hundreds of thousands of vacancies that we don't even begin to fill with immigrants, let alone with European Union citizens. Big holes in our pension systems, depopulating countries and regions. That's a pretty scary list, isn't it? Should we panic? If so, in what direction should we be panicking? To offer us some advice and hopefully some consolation, we have put together an excellent panel of politicians and experts. We're still waiting for two of our speakers. I will introduce the one that's with us in the room. Rainer Munz is a senior research associate at the Martin Center and a visiting professor at the Central European University in Vienna. We're expecting soon here in the room Nicole de Moor, the State Secretary for Asylum and Migration of Belgium, and connecting online, Sofia Zacharaki, Minister for Social Cohesion and Family Affairs of Greece. So, Rainer, I will begin with you. Is a demographic panic justified? Before you start, Mr. Moore, welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
No problem. I've just introduced you, but I will now start with Rainer Munz.
Okay. So, good afternoon. It's a pleasure being here, although I'm not sure whether it's going to be a pleasure for you to listen to us, but we'll see that in a moment. Remember the year 2012? Obama just got re-elected against John McCain. Donald Tusk was Prime Minister of Poland. Angela Merkel had already finished her 6th year in power. David Cameron was still in a coalition with the Liberals, preventing him from resorting to a referendum, things like that. But the main reason to remember the year 2012 is another one. The year 2012 was the last year when we had more children born in Europe than people dying. The last year in your and my lifetime. It will never be again the case that we will have more birth than death in Europe for reasons that are obvious, although not known to everyone, because we live in a continent of extremes. Europe has the highest life expectancy among all continents, and Europe has the lowest number of children per woman or per family of all continents, although there's places like Singapore or Korea or Japan where it's even lower than the European average, but single countries, right? So, since the year 2013, things have evolved. We now have about 1.5 million people in excess dying over the number of children being born in the EU27, but we have the same situation outside the EU, be it from Moldova to Norway to the UK. So it's we are not the EU is not special in that sense. The number, and then we have the baby boomers entering into retirement. Many of them already having retired at an early age, way too young usually, and the younger generation, the next generation now at the age of 0 to 20. About to enter the labor market next year or within the next 20 years, is 35% smaller than the baby boom generation. And this creates that kind of lack of labor that Vit, you have just described. Now, no reason to panic. There's 6 easy ways out. 6 easy ways out. Easy theoretically, on paper, mathematically. The first easy way out is prevent people from retiring. The later you retire, the better for from a demographic and a socioeconomic and a labor market point of view, because you continue contributing the system before starting to take out. So the ideal would be you work till you die, but I think that's not the way we want to go it. But at least 3, 4, 5 years more over the next 15 years would help a lot. Would help a lot. That's the, how you say, mathematically easiest way, because it contributes both to the labor market and to the demography and to the social security side that you have rightly alluded. So, second way out, work more during the week. Yeah? Plenty of people are not working full time. In the country where I live for the moment, Austria, 52% of all women and 13% of all men on the labor market are working sometimes between half-time and 2/3 of the time. Why? Because of high taxation rate. People find out, I have been working 40 hours, I'm working only 20 hours, I don't make half of what I made before. Maybe I'm going home with 3/4 of what I had before. Yeah? So marginal taxation punishes full-time work. No discussion about that. Lack of kindergartens, lack of facilities for children who are going to school in the afternoon, all that thing also contributes to that development. So, third way out, bring in groups who are not working. So we have a group of domestic housewives and mothers. Same issues apply, particularly when it comes to taking care of the children. Members of diasporas and immigrant communities, particularly women, also of Turkish, of Afghan, of Somali origin, of whatever, you can name it, much lower labor force participation, regardless of whether they came legally or via asylum, than native women of the same country. And then we have a group of young people who didn't manage to properly graduate from our educational system. The acronym is NEET, called neither in employment, nor in education, nor in training. Yeah, so we have plenty of needs, so-called NEET generation people among young people, particularly of migrant origin, so of parents who have immigrated. Fourth way out is bring in more migrants. Now, the Martin Center has just recently published a publication to which I have contributed, which shows if we would continue bringing the type of migrants that we had over the past 10 years, it would not help. Most of them are not readily joining the labor market, because the main avenues of arrival is humanitarian, asylum, temporary protection, think about Ukraine, and marriage, migration, and family reunion, also often bringing people who are not ready to join the labor market anytime soon. So we would need more migrants if we would not have a much higher retirement age, but not exactly the type of migrants that we have seen over the past 10 years. So this is a caveat. Fifth way out, do not reduce pensions, but index them below inflation rate. Maybe not for everyone, so one could exclude the lower segments, but if the pension payments wouldn't go up at the same extent as inflation or above inflation, like many countries have been doing in the past for obvious populist reasons, because the pensioners are a big group retiring after retirement, voting for middle-of-the-road parties. So you can say that's a voter's bribe by working on their pensions. And the sixth way out is higher taxes and higher contributions. So you see, addressing the demography issue is the best way of losing the next elections. Not addressing is the alternative way of losing the next election. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Thanks, Rainer, for that punchy introduction into our debate. Ms. de Moor, do you see a reason to panic? Do any of these proposals appeal?
Well, I think we should never panic. Well, first of all, very happy to be here. Happy to see you all. I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this important discussion. And I think we already had a very interesting 6 ways out. Of course, as a state secretary competent for migration, I would like to address one of the possible way outs, and this is migration. But I think, of course, the topics, demography, migration, changing societies are deeply interconnected and are fundamental questions for the future of our union and of our shared values. I also want to apologize for being a bit late because we are, well, we hope in the final phase of government negotiations to form a new government in Belgium. And also within these negotiations, migration, even integration is an important topic. Lack of labor forces is an important topic. So we even see in current negotiations that the topics you are addressing today are important and are forming our decisions. And it's clear that Europe's demographic situation is not a reason for optimism today, and the aging of our population has significant consequences for our welfare system, for our labor market, for our intergenerational solidarity. In Belgium, we have a fertility rate of 1.6 and a very high population density. And these challenges are very concrete every day. And the debate is perhaps not so much about increasing this number, which would be seen also by the population as too intrusive or against the individual right to choose his own family or whether or not to start a family. But of course, the topics are of the work-life balance, or the availability, the affordability of childcare are also important topics on the political agenda. Now, at the same time, we see employers increasingly demanding for labor forces from abroad, and at the same time, we have societal debates, which are often very intense, around how to manage such inflows of migrants. For example, when it concerns housing shortages or capacity in education or healthcare. So it poses a lot of challenges to our society. Now, generally, I believe the demographic and societal realities described demand a dual response. This is, on the one hand, increasing the labor market participation of the existing or present population. As you already mentioned, there are some groups are really underrepresented on the labor market: women, seniors, groups with a migration background. And on the other hand, we have to manage migration in a way that meets our economic needs, while, and this is very important, also fostering social cohesion. We should not forget this, this last part when we talk about migration. So in other words, migration, if managed well, this is a very important condition, can be part of the solution. And this part of the solution is also very important. I do not believe migration is the only way out. As you mentioned, there are different ways out. Migration is one of it. And I think about 1 month ago, I was in Vienna at the ICMPD migration conference, where we had some very interesting discussions. And there was Professor Ivan Krastev, who observed that Europe is sometimes afraid of its own attractiveness for migration. Our societies fear that they are, well, simply put, too many of them and too few of us. This is our demographic challenge, and this perception contributes to what is then described as the demographic panic. Yet I think it overlooks the reality that migration, if well structured, can rejuvenate our societies, can support welfare system, and can sustain economic competitiveness. But there are some very important conditions. Because doing so, we must address this public concern with pragmatic solutions. And of course, I know we are not helped by the disproportionate media attention for irregular migration. I say disproportionate because it's disproportionate in numbers. As you know, there is less than 10% of the migration that receives more than 90% of media attention. And this fuels, of course, political polarization. Now, we as policymakers have the task to redirect this conversation towards comprehensive migration management, highlighting regular migration and its benefits. But of course, in order to redirect this attention from irregular migration, we need to find solutions to fight irregular migration. We should not only redirect a conversation, we should find solutions. And I think we can do so by delivering on the task. We have to make new legislation to manage migration in a more orderly and legal way. And there, the EU Asylum and Migration Pact comes into the discussion, the pact which Belgium helped to secure during the presidency of the Council. This is a huge step forward after more than 10 years of discussion in Europe on how to manage migration, and it provides a framework for such a balanced migration approach, especially on asylum, because it not only strengthens solidarity among member states with a clear division of solidarity and responsibility, but it also helps us to manage migration flows and to fight against irregular migration. Now we are now at the stage where we not only found an agreement on the pact, we have managed to put it into legislation, but now implementation is key. It's a priority for all member states, and I see all member states are currently now working towards implementation, which is very reassuring. Of course, we need to be realistic as well. It will take some years before we actually see the results of the European Pact on the ground. Secondly, it is clear that aside from the EU Asylum and Migration Pact, we need other measures as well, both at the European as well as on the national level. I think on the European level, we need to work on more durable partnership with countries of origin and transit countries in order to better manage migration flows. Migration management starts where migration itself starts. So this is really important. Now, on the national level, and turning to the Belgian situation, I already mentioned we should not forget to work on social cohesion. A society does not grow from itself. We have to construct it. So it's an important challenge. One of those challenges, and you already mentioned, is that in our legal migration, we continue to see that it's dominated predominantly by family reunification and not by labor migration. And of course, it's human and natural to prioritize families, I think a value deeply aligned with Christian democratic principles, but this also limits our ability to attract the kind of workforce that we need to sustain our competitiveness and our welfare system. Now, how can we address this concretely? I believe we should align our integration policies much more closely with our migration policy. We cannot have a successful migration policy without integration policies. This is what we forgot or neglect to do in the 50s, 60s, early 70s, when we first needed labor migration forces in the post-World War economies. We started to attract labor forces first inside of Europe and then from outside of Europe, in Belgium, predominantly from Turkey and Morocco, where we had concluded agreements. But we saw this form of labor migration merely as a way to attract labor forces. We did not pay any attention to the integration of those new citizens and their children and grandchildren into our societies. We used in Belgium and in many other countries and the gastarbeiters. The wording already explains how we saw this kind of labor forces. We thought people would come and work and then they would go back to their own countries, which of course did not happen. And we only started to develop integration policies 20, 30, 40 years later. So this is really important. Successful integration is something that benefits not only the newcomers but the whole society. And when we first started to develop integration policies, some voices still saw it as hard policy or as a punishment, but integration is not a punishment. Integration helps people to find their future, to build a constructive future in our lives. It helps people to contribute economically, socially, culturally to their new homes, strengthening also the very fabric of our European way of life. So we need policies that focus on education, housing, community engagement to help preserve the values that define Europe, which is democracy, equality, and freedom. And when migrants are empowered to participate fully in society, they do not only help us to uphold and enrich these principles, but also to make Europe stronger, more resilient in the face of change. And of course, it's easier said than done, but I think we have taken some important steps in our national policies. We should continue to do so. People not only have to have access to integration and language courses, but we need to make sure people follow these courses. We need to install obligations to contribute into our society. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think these are, perhaps I will leave it up here for the introduction. Migration is one of the ways out of our demographic challenges, but only if we manage to organize it properly, orderly, in a legal way, when we fight irregular migration and work on integration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In the meantime, Minister Zacharaki has joined us online. Sofia Zacharaki, we have been discussing some of the demographic challenges facing Europe, demographic aging, depopulation, problems with pensions, etc. How do you see things from where you are in Greece?
Actually, I see them from a very small village somewhere in western Greece. And actually, it's one of the places that has seen a steep decline in demography. So I would say I'm at the right place at the right time in unfavorable conditions. But still, I'm very happy to be here with you at the Martin Center event. I was supposed to be there in person, but I had to be in the city of Kastoria today, where we introduced a local growth plan. And I think locality will play a very vital role in trying to revitalize the local communities and actually allow younger people to stay where they wish to stay. It would be a part of a reply when we discuss about ways to tackle the demographic situation. I heard a lot of phrases and a lot of things that we constantly discuss here in Greece. Yesterday, I was with the EBSCO Council meeting, and we also mentioned the role of demography. Commissioner Syriza was there and with her renewed competences, and I was happy to introduce the first ever for Greece all-comprehensive action plan on demography. It is the first member state that introduced this horizontal, let's say, action plan right after the toolkit with the European Commission. And if there is time and I can allow me to share some data from Greece, we have seen since 2011 Greece having a negative natural population balance. Half of Greece's population today is over 46 years old. More than one in 5 residents are over 65. And of course, we say that in some demographic projections by 2070, the largest demographic group in Europe and Greece will be women over 90 years old. And as I heard, of course, the opinion shared by the expert and, of course, from Belgium, I couldn't agree more than if we talk about migration, we will mention, of course, the positive impact that it might have, but only if we're talking about controlled migration, tackling irregular migration, and of course, talking about integration. And I believe here that in our local communities, we haven't been successful in doing so. I feel that the social cohesion part of migration, of education policies, integrating younger children in language acquisition, and of course, social activities programs has not been that effective, especially here in Greece. And of course, the professional qualification path and the professional achievements by migrants here have been overcast by uncontrolled flows that we had seen back in 2015. Of course, as a center-right government since 2019, we have managed to contain illegal migration by 85%, and we have seen harmonization in post-asylum policies, expeditionary asylum process, and a strict law concerning irregular migration here in Greece. But we cannot do this alone. As the border of Europe here, we have made sure that we constructed a wall in the eastern part of Macedonia, and we have tried to introduce uh, just but strict laws when we're talking about migration, especially from the islands of the Aegean. Now, what is important when we're talking about the migration role in demography is try also to balance the feeling of the local communities, this feeling of unrest that it might incur, and talk to them in a pragmatic way, in a pragmatic manner, when we say that there is a just system, there is a strict system, but we need, especially in some communities, we need the important role of migrants, especially in these deficiencies in the workforce. Now, apart from migration, allow me also to share some very basic data about our national action plan, because migration can be partly, as we said, a part of the solution, but it cannot be a sole part of the discussion. Now, we worked with all the other ministers because it has to be, as I mentioned before, a horizontal action plan. We have already compiled this decade-long plan of 100 targeted actions, an estimated budget of 20 billion euro, and the key pillars of our action plan include family support, work-life balance, strengthen the workforce, especially intensifying the efforts of women and the younger population, focusing also on needs, and I heard that you had this discussion before, managing the aging population and boosting regional economies, just like we do here with our targeted action plan for growth, especially for the local economies, as I said. We want to help young people start families without, of course, compromising their professional ambitions. Women, in particular, face substantial barriers due to caregiving responsibilities, and expanding their participation in the workforce, as I said before, is achieving to alleviating labor shortages. From 2019 to 2024, women's employment in Greece rose by 24.6%, and their average earning increased by 14.3%. And in 2025, we will be also transposing the competent directive on equal pay. We have extended maternity leaves to 9 months for self-employed women, female farmers, and we try to create parity with the public sector and made it transferable also to the father in order to share the the, the, the burden, let's say, the responsibility for child rearing. We have already significantly expanded access to early education, child care, providing early intervention, increasing all the budget for vouchers for parents to be able to acquire this position in childhood care, early childhood centers. And we also introduce best practice from other countries, like the model of France with the neighborhood nannies. We want to, of course, as I said before, help the younger population participate more in the workforce. And since 2019, we have created over 500,000 jobs and achieved a net 28.9 increase in youth employment. You mentioned before the part of the expat communities, and you know that in Greece before, because of the recurring economic crisis, we have seen more than 500,000 young people, dynamic young people, leaving the country back in 2012. Now, it is a sign of optimism that we see about 300,000 younger Greeks coming back to Greece in the past 5 years. We want to make sure that this continues. We have launched Rebrain Greece initiative from the Ministry of Labor alongside the private sector, where we upload all the existing professional qualification, let's say opportunities, job offers, well-paid job offers in IT, in medicine, and of course in pharmaceutical industry, in order to attract the younger dynamic population come back. And we are working very closely with the private sector. We have introduced tax relief measures for all family-centered policies in order to help, of course, create a framework, a positive framework, and help the younger people make a decision should they want to have a family. Now, I don't want to leave out the very important aspect of informing the public, because you know that when we're talking about demography and the decision of younger people also to have a family, should they want to, is also a matter of perception and mindset. So starting January 2025, we will launch a campaign in order to help inform the public of their choice, and of course help them inform of all the measures in order to boost the family, in order to boost the professional career, and also inform them of all the measures that we take about the housing initiatives here in Greece. Now, talking about housing, let me also inform Steve yesterday that we have launched a strategy in order to deploy a budget of 5 billion euro for the next 5 years in order to have an all-comprehensive housing strategy here in Greece. So, yes, intensify the professional perspective and aspects of the younger population and women and people with disability. Number two, trying to balance, of course, the work and life obligations, reactivate the aging population. We have introduced laws in order to reintroduce the pensioners into the workforce without them losing their pension. And we see that more than 200,000 people have come back to work, pensioners coming back, and also trying to control migration and help more this integration part, but it has clearly failed in some communities, and we really want to remedy that. But then again, I couldn't stress enough the element of the necessity for that to be a European policy that it has to be strengthened even more. Asylum process, integration process, in a fair and just way when we talk about contribution of migration to the demographic challenges that we face.
Thank you, Minister Zacharaki. I think I will now ask a colleague to come to the stage and introduce the result of our Slido poll.
Thank you, Vít. Indeed, we have quite some interesting results for you from the question we asked, which was, how should Europe address the aging of its societies? So as you see here on the screen, 47% voted for promoting flexible retirement and part-time work for pensioners. Same percentage, 24% voted for create conditions for more women to be able to work, but also accept that the population will shrink and the economy will stop growing, and only 6% voted increase immigration to fill vacancies and skills gaps.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting outcome there. Would anybody in the room care to comment, maybe? Rainer, Mr. Moor? Yeah.
I'm happy to comment. This seems to be, how you say, from a political economy point of view, this seems to be the cheapest way out. Yeah? Let people retire and have some of them continue working, right? Now, why is it important to increase retirement age and be flexible at the same time? Flexible is fine, but if the retirement age stays the same, flexibility will usually be below the statutory and pension age. So if you move up retirement age to 67, 69 or something like this, the flexibility can remain, but the people will choose another benchmark for their flexibility decision. So if you want to have people work longer, it's not only sufficient to make to have that below the ceiling. Yeah, you need to rise the ceiling, and then still people can retire early. But you need for the fairness of the system, you would need an actuarian how you say, malus on retirement early, which would be about 8% for a year. So if you retire 5 years below the statutory retirement age, you would get 40% less on your pension. Now, this would be a large disincentive for many people to choose that. Now, as a matter of fairness, one would see that one need to exempt many categories of blue-collar workers from that kind of development because their life expectancy is 10 years lower than people like us here in the room. This needs to be taken care of. But the fact that civil servants retire 5 years before they are due to retire is something that should not be stopped, because maybe they are not incentivized anymore to work, but should not be gratified by giving them a full pension. And I think you would need that kind of flexibility. Now, let's go to the last one. We do not need to increase immigration to fill the gaps. We just need other immigrants.
Different type of immigrant.
There was 22 million immigrants over the 10-year period from 2013, from 2022, who came to an EU country. Third country nationals entering an EU. 22 millions in 10 years. Among them, a third of them in the year 2022 only because of the Ukrainians. 7 million of these 22 millions were first asylum seekers. 4 million were people under temporary protection from Ukraine. This is more than 50% of the total inflow. Employment rates in these groups, surprisingly small, takes 10, 15 years till they get to the same level as those. We had less than 4 million people arriving in Europe with a labor permit. And that's too small. And that brings me to my last point here, because you said we as Christian Democrats should have a favorable view of family reunion. In a way, I heard it, maybe I have overheard.
No.
I think it's important to understand that there's 3 types of family reunion. Now we see, as we have handed out almost 4 million, refugee status papers to people living in Europe, these refugees can now bring their families. Okay. The second one is labor migrants. If you hire a highly skilled person today, you have to allow them to bring their family. They will not come if you say, stay away. Huh? If we would only hire PhDs, we shouldn't worry about that. But the most important avenue in family reunion is families who have never existed before. That's marriage migration. I take the example of France, but we could also talk about Belgium. Take the example of France. France has handed out 10,000 labor permits to Algerian nationals over the past 10 years. 10,000. The number of family reunion cases between Algeria and France was 157,000. If you do not think that these 10,000 labor migrants have brought 15 family members with them, which is, it's not realistic, you can see. The vast majority of family reunion between France and Algeria, between Algeria and France, is members of the Algerian diaspora in France with French citizens getting married to Algerians living in the ancestral lands of their grandparents. And many of these people, the majority of them women coming that way, are not incentivized to join the labor market because it's not the purpose why they get imported by their families in a way. And I think we have to at least rethink that part of family migration. It's my personal view. I know that is not shared by everyone, but at least I want to put this elephant on the table, right?
Thanks, Rainer. Ms. de Moor, you wanted to respond.
Yeah, I think it's very important that you put the elephant on the table and in a reaction, because these results do not surprise me. In particular, the last result, the 6%. I always give this as an answer to everybody who says we need labor migration, we need more legal migration. It is very difficult, if not impossible, to advocate for more legal migration if you do not address irregular migration. And I do not believe those that say, well, we need legal migration to solve irregular migration.
No.
That's not the connection. These are not, it's a different group of people, and you need both actions. We can facilitate legal migration for the labor market, but at the same time we must address irregular migration, and we need other measures. It's not because we allow people to migrate legally that the others will stop coming irregularly. It's another group of people, but it's impossible to organize and to advocate for legal migration if you do not fight irregular migration. That's the interconnection, not the other way around. And I hear you saying we just need another type of migrants. Well, correct, but it's a little bit more difficult or it's easier said than done, let's put it like that. But of course there are ways, and I think two important things. First of all, in organizing the legal migration or facilitating labor migration, we need to make choices. We cannot allow labor migration for any kind of job. So we need to be very intelligent in allowing or listing the kind of jobs for which we facilitate labor migration. It's not for any kind of job. If we do organize labor migration, people often have the idea that the people that we need on our labor market are just waiting somewhere for us to allow them to have a visa. That's not the reality. Often we need to organize labor migration in a way that we also connect it to education programs or cooperation with countries of origin to make sure that those labor forces that we need are formed somewhere. They are not just waiting. We need some specific profiles. We need very technical profiles. So it's not that easy to say, well, we just need to give visa and then people will arrive like that. We also need to organize integration policies. I already mentioned that. So I think we can organize legal migration, but for me, it has to be part of a broader migration cooperation with countries of origin. This is very crucial because this is what we need to manage migration flows, to address irregular migration, to return those that are in irregular stay. We need to have durable partnership with countries of origin. Legal migration can be part of it, but we cannot just organize legal migration from whatever country and for whatever job. But we can do more to attract the migrants that we need. Secondly, that's another part of the discussion. We often talk, also in Belgium, about active and passive migrants. Active migrants are those that we attract because of the job. They come to Belgium to fill in a certain labor market shortage. And then there are all the passive migrants, which are those that are coming through family reunification, asylum, or any other kind of reason. I do not like even the wording active and passive migrants, because it looks like the first group is coming to work and is working, and the second group is not coming to work. They are coming for other reasons, so they are not working. Well, the last part is not what we should accept. Also, those coming for other reasons, like because they are in need of international protection, they get asylum, they come for family reunification. Of course, we need to adapt legislation on family reunification, I agree, but there will always be family reunification. We need to do more to get this group active on the labor market, and it is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. We need to adapt our social systems and adapt our integration policies to make sure we help them as soon as possible to find a job and in the labor market. And in Belgium, for example, we changed our policy to activate asylum seekers a couple of years ago. And when I first started doing this about 4 years ago, I got a lot of reaction that we should not focus or prioritize activating asylum seekers. They just arrive in Belgium. They come from a traumatized situation, coming from a situation of war, or they were in dramatic situations on the route towards Europe, which is often the case, of course, but there were a lot of people against the fact that we should prioritize asylum seekers. seekers, and it was very difficult to activate them on the labor market because they are in a reception facility, they do not have a car to go to work, etc., etc. So there are many reasons to say, well, it's very difficult. Well, we still prioritized this group. We organized job markets in our reception facilities. We found solutions for the mobility issue. We even had bicycle classes in reception facilities to learn people how to ride a bike. This sounds very small as an action, but in a lot of reception facilities, asylum seekers are now getting on their bike to go to work. They have found a job through the job markets we organized, and the results are amazing. Nobody in Belgium expected that we could have such a results. And of course, it's a small group, the asylum seekers. It's only 10% of the whole migration influx, and there are much more people in family reunification. But we do see that when we manage to lower some thresholds, when we actively organize this activation policies in the reception facilities, we can manage to activate this group. It's not easy, but if we would only do the things that are easy, we wouldn't do anything on migration, I think. So it is possible to active also the so-called passive migrants, and it's not even possible, it's necessary to do it.
Thank you. I would like to ask our audience now to start thinking about your questions or comments. Before you ask, I just want to highlight one point from what Minister Zacharaki said, something that we forget, that success of Greece shows us the bringing of more people into jobs, increasing the employment level, as you pointed out, and I think this is the EU's forgotten success story sometimes. When you look at the past 2 decades, many more people of working age are now actually working than there were then. Now, questions or comments from the audience, please. If so, please raise your hand, quickly introduce yourself and speak to the point.
May I add something? I'm sorry, something.
Please go ahead. Yeah, please.
Sorry, I was actually listening to Nicole right now about the, what we do and shouldn't do when we actually sometimes refer to at the same time legal and illegal migration, and we by mistake, I think it's done very forcefully sometimes by radicalists when they do this show, but we have to definitely discern between the two. I would like to mention how important it is to work better with the regions. What we do here in Greece is try to identify a little bit the local needs and connect them to the corresponding petitions for hospitality sector, which is very much, of course, lacking people here in Greece, especially at dynamic ages, all private sector, where we see areas, regions like Peloponnese, really seeking for legal migration, professional, let's say, options. And secondly, point out the vast importance of working well with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as regards, of course, to targeting that part of bilateral relations, so EU and the corresponding country of origin relations, and try to work better on doing that. So I would say that 2 points that I'd like to stress. What we do here in Greece is working better with our regions, identifying the local needs, and then trying also to smoothen out possible local reactions by the local population when they see that integration works well when it is connected to the professional needs that are met. And secondly, of course, the huge importance of working well with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, respectively, in order to identifying those areas of collaboration. Just those 2 points, because my connection is very fragile, and I'm not sure how long I can stay in the connection. I just wanted to make sure that I also contribute in these last 2 parts of discussion. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the specific examples from Greece. Much appreciated. There's a question behind me here.
Great, thanks. Yes, my name is Sandra Kaduri from Keeping Channels Open, a dialogue network. My question is just about any practical measures to help citizens. It seems to me there's a bit of a gap here, because if we're talking about older workers, they seem to be struggling to get jobs. So what is being done to encourage citizens who maybe have been marginalized, who've been out of work, to fill the labor gaps? Where are these labor gaps? Because I don't see them. And also to help people adapt to the new labor markets, technology training, lifelong learning. Where is that? Because I don't see it. So what efforts are being made to help these older groups, marginalized groups, to connect with the new labor market?
Okay. The policies, or the perhaps invisible policies. There's another gentleman behind me, and then there's a question there at the back, and that's, I think, all we have time for.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Not to disbalance the audience, but as the mic was here, it's a question to Madam State Secretary de Moor. You have mentioned Ukrainians under temporary protection. I would like to ask, do you see any structural differences compared to other migrant groups from the point of view of ability, readiness for social integration during this 2.5 years they started to arrive? And I forgot to present myself. I'm Andrzej Zajec, Head of Office of the Council of Europe to the EU.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And there's a last question there at the back. Andrea.
Thanks, just Owen from the Martin Centre. I asked this question as a humble economist, but wouldn't one potential solution just be the implementation of a points-based Australia-style immigration scheme with a list of available occupations updated regularly? Thanks.
Okay, so we take the 3 questions. If there is more time, I will take more. I'm sorry, but right now we have to answer the question. So who wants to go first on any of these 3? Ukrainians, well, that was specifically for you, Ukrainians in Belgium, the apparently invisible policies to get more people into the labor market, and the points-based system. Who wants to go? Minister Zacharaki, please.
I would also like to apologize also to esteemed panelists, but I have to leave again for a 4-hour drive to Athens. I just heard the question about how we can activate, and it was a very same question, and I think a successful point of discussion. Just some practical examples of what we do here in Greece, trying to activate the GMI holders, people who get the guaranteed minimum income. So these are unemployed people, and we just introduced an employment scheme. So we have reskilling and upskilling programs that are quite extensive in order to introduce people to the new local employment reality. And after that, subsidized programs where we pay full wages, and we cover that for 12 months. And when they finish, we continue paying their pension scheme, let's say, all the amount that incurs for another 24 months. So we do a lot of work with the Minister of Labour in order to activate that part of the population, younger population and more aged population that have been out of work for a long time, mainly targeting the GMI holders guaranteed minimum income, also people listed in the unemployment benefit scheme. And we also target the older population. We introduced reskilling and upskilling programs, as well as digital skills reskilling and upskilling programs. And also working with the local employment services, we introduced a program targeted at the people aged 55 to 67, which is the retirement age here in Greece, 67 years of age, where we can help them reach more easily and in a more comprehensive way the retirement age. So activation is very important, especially in countries where have seen steep declines in employment rates, but a very steady, consistent effort to create more jobs and help them get back to a new, of course, digital and employment reality. So I would say that these are 3 practical examples of what we do using local funds, state funds, budget funds, as well as the RRF funds.
Thanks. Thanks, Ms. Zacharaki. Ms. de Moor, specific question for you.
Yes, two questions on migration. Perhaps first of all on the labor migration. I often get this question, why do you not organize labor migration like Australia does or like Canada does, where for some specific jobs you can apply for a visum to get to Europe, to Belgium, as a labor migrant. And the reaction is, well, we already have such a system. We have, people do not know, but we have in Belgium, depending on the region where you want to go to, Flanders, Brussels, or the Wallon region, we have lists of jobs, of professions where you can apply for. So you can come to Belgium when you are a high-skilled labor migrant. This is already for a long time the case, and for many years it was the only possibility. You need to be a highly skilled labor migrant. But since a couple of years, you do no longer need to be a highly skilled labor migrant. You can come for very middle or even lower skilled professions based on a list, which is then based on the labor market shortages. So each region decides which is the list of jobs where you can come from. For which you can come to Belgium. But what I notice is that, well, a lot of people do not know, also in Belgium. I often get the question, why don't you organize labor migration? It exists, and I often, well, in order to talk about migration and to get in the debate, often, well, in migration there are a lot of elephants in the room. I often do what I call the living room debates. I go and organize debates on migration in smaller groups of people, and I always start with a little questionnaire, a quiz. I ask how many people do you think arrive in Belgium every year as a labor migrant, and people do not know. They often say 0 or a couple of hundreds. Well, it are 10,000s of people that get a visa to come and work in Belgium every year from outside the EU. Inside of the EU, of course, a lot of European nationals come and work in Belgium, but also non-European nationals. So it's a good thing. It's because our labor market needs it. Of course, as I already mentioned, we need to address the integration, housing shortages, and so on. But it's a good thing, but we also need to promote it. A lot of people do not know that it exists. So the answer, in short, is yes, but we already have such a system. And as for the Ukrainians, well, we saw a lot of similarities with other types of refugees. And in the first period that people arrive, and of course this was very specific for the Ukrainian refugees, it was a lot of people in a very short time. But the first period people arrive, it's not easy to activate them on the labor markets. And for Ukrainians, the specific of the particularity which made it even more difficult is that it were often single mom with children, which is even more difficult to activate them in a short term on the labor market. So the numbers of Ukrainians active on the labor market in the first period were very, very low. In the meantime, now it's changing. More and more Ukrainians are working. They are quickly learning the language. So this is a difference with some refugees coming from other regions. The children that are in school learn the language very quick. Of course, it's much easier for Ukrainian children that have a good schooling system, education system in Ukraine to go to Belgian schools and learn Dutch than for Afghan teenagers who have almost never seen any kind of functioning education system. It's quite logic that it's for an Afghan boy of 14 years old more difficult than for a Ukrainian boy of 14 years old. So there are some differences depending on where you come from, the education system in your own country. But for the employment rate, we see similar challenges. It's improving, but it's not enough. And what is very similar to any kind of refugee is certainly if it's war refugees that did not plan their flight towards Europe, it's not a it's not migrating in a planned way. It's freeing your country in an unplanned way. Most of those arriving want to return. The first period, most of those arriving want to return. It changes depending on your integration, but even more so the integration of your children. Your children go to school after 1 year, after 2 years, then you see they're learning the language, they are integrating, they probably have much more opportunities or another future here than when they return to a country which has been devastated by war. So it changes, and then people start to work more, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes left. Rainer, you can put any of the questions.
First answer, older people, yes, they need training. We would also have to reconsider our payment scales, because usually we have payment systems where the older you get, the more you earn, but you're not getting more productive the older you are. So I think this needs to be addressed. And still, the majority of older people going into retirement get into retirement from an active job and not out of unemployment. So at least these people could stay longer because they already have a job. It's more difficult for those who are unemployed above age 55 or something like that. 2 more footnotes to Australia. First, Australia has no irregular migrants arriving there. This has been stopped, these boat people, and it was not more than a couple of hundred anyhow in the past. Secondly, Australia in the past has recruited people based on a merit system, most of them coming with high skills. Then you don't have to worry about marriage and family migration, because high-skilled people usually don't get married to analphabets from their own countries, so that's an easy way. Third element, Australia doesn't have a large free movement, so only with New Zealand. In Europe, usually we fill our gaps on the labor markets with citizens of other EU countries. Yeah, as I said, 2013, 2022, less than 4 million people admitted on a labor permit basis, but 14 million people moving from one EU country to another. Now, it doesn't help Europe as a whole because it leads to the depopulation of parts of Europe, but it leads to a better allocation of labor within Europe. So somebody who leaves Bulgaria and works in Belgium probably has a higher productivity. That's all we can say.
Thank you very much, Anna. I have to stop you there.
Yeah.
It will be lovely to continue the debate. Unfortunately, our time is up. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to you, our audience. We'll now stay seated for a second. I'll give the floor back to my colleague.
Yeah.